People often ask me what the real role of the consultant is in whatever field. And I have quite a strong opinion about that. I think the real role of the consultant is to add value. And the value has to be substantially greater in proportion than the fee that the consultant earns. So consultants should be handsomely paid for their input, but only if they're generating very, very substantial market share gains, profitability gains, effectiveness gains for the client. Profitability if it's a commercial client, but some other kind of organisational benefit of real substance if it's, for example, a public sector client or a charity client. The question that follows that is, how does the consultant do it? And I think, to really sum it up, the notion is the consultant should be the guy that asks the questions and takes the viewpoint that are really difficult for people inside the organisation to take. So there might be, let's say, in a board of a brand company, sensible, intelligent, highly educated, powerful people, but for some reason, between them, they're not asking the killer question that needs to be asked. And I've seen that happen over and over again. It's not because they're afraid to, it's because, in a sense, there's something about the pressure pot of an organisation that stops them asking that question, stops them doing the little bit of digging around with their teams and other people in their organisations that would get them to a new and enhanced place. And the role of the consultant is to ask those questions, to go off to another part of the organisation to ask questions over there, to bring back stories from the front line and to say, I've been talking to Joe in this department and he says it's not like you think it is at all. I've been talking to this customer and they say that it's not like it says in your quantitative research at all. I've been drilling down and having a proper conversation with them and they say it's completely different. Now let's talk about that. That's the first role. The thing that follows then is to establish a sensible, practical, effective process for making some change. And what I try to do, whether I'm talking about brand or business strategy or marketing or creativity and innovation, is to come up with a workable process that can take a company from point A to point A plus of some kind. I don't say to point B, because point B is predetermined. Lots and lots of companies think, I need to go from point A to point B. What I say is, hang on a minute, maybe it's not point B you need to go to. Maybe we need to think about a different point. We do this in a whole host of ways, and I try to use the simplest, easiest to understand techniques. I'm not a fan of massive database crunching in order to make strategic decisions. I'm much more about stimulating conversation amongst intelligent people who can then influence how their business goes. And this chart is one really simple example. It's got 4 boxes on it. In a sense, it's a very simple instrument. It's almost a sort of a craft instrument. It's not a scientific instrument, but it really works. This is just one of many different discussion pieces that we use. This particular one I learned from an American consultant called Alan Weiss. It's one of dozens of different pieces that you use to generate a high-level discussion with people. If you look at the 4 boxes, there are 4 places where a company can play. They can either have, let's start at the bottom left, no strategy or a very weak strategy and very weak operations. Now that means that they don't know where they're going and they're not very good at getting there. Imagine how long a company like that's going to be in business. Not very long. If they've survived this far, it's because the market's been on their side and they've been lucky. Another option is to have a weak strategy, i.e. I'm not terribly sure where I'm going, but I'm really, really good. In other words, our factory works really well, our sales team work really well, we're selling a lot of stuff, we're making a living, no idea where we're going. Now what's the problem there, you might say? Well, the problem there is if the economic wind changes, you're in trouble, because you're dependent on your operations, and actually your operations might get outdated. You might be making a product that suddenly gets outmaneuvered by a new company entirely. You can operate here in the top left-hand corner with a very strong strategy, where the managing director and all his or her team are very clear about where they want to go. But down on the factory floor, down out in the field sales, down in the product development area, somebody's not doing their job properly. So we've got a great strategy, but we haven't got the operations to support it. We know exactly what we want to achieve, but we're not going to get there. The problem with that is there's a lot of unfulfilled wishes and a lot of disappointments. And in the top right-hand corner, we've got the sort of the magic bit, which is you've got really strong strategy. We know exactly where we want to go, and we've got really strong operations. We've sorted that bit as well. And this very simple chart enables me to have a pretty heavyweight conversation, but in normal language, with managing directors, CEOs, the heads of organisations. And what I very often find is that they will slightly reluctantly admit that they're here with strong strategy, weak ops, here with weak strategy but strong ops. Very occasionally they'll admit they're in serious trouble and they're down here. Very few people actually will come out and sort of thump the table and say, no, we've got a great strategy and great operations. And the point of this is not that we go, yes, you're number 1, 2, 3 or 4. The point is it generates a conversation. That's the entire point. It generates a conversation that can be detailed and rich and get you to the heart of where a company wants to go. And that is what consultancy is about. That's why it's important.